You can't be serious!
Srila shouted, looking at the unimpressed face of the duty assignment officer. He had only just been hired, and they were doing this to him? The officer's scales stayed at middling green, showing a truly exceptional lack of sympathy.
The route needs a driver. You need a route.
She stamped the papers in front of her, then slid them forward.
Mazel tov.
Srila took the assignment in hand, looking over the document and all it meant for him. He turned more and more blue as his bulbous, chameleon-like eyes traveled down the form. Althar Shipping Co. Cleeth Interstellar Shipping License 002583. Driver Srila Ebnathal. Male. Delta. Ship Althar Gamma 08. Route Hounth Cluster. Sector 8. System 32B. Planet 3. Pay structure Alpha 3. Danger Pay Level 8. Local designation Milky Way Galaxy. Sol System. Earth. There was a manifest, a ship repair manual, further coordinates, but he couldn't look past that word. Earth. A planet so unbelievably cruel that it created a breed of monstrosity known as humans. Like the Grindari, but taller, more muscular, and bent to acts of fury like no other sapient. He'd heard the stories. He even knew someone who'd been on the receiving end of human aggression. His cousin's fourth husband's daughter's aunt had been at the Grindari Terraforming Expo. The humans pulled a satellite out of orbit and nearly evaporated the Cleeth biodome.
There's nothing you can do?
His coloration and pleading eyes begged for reprieve, for hope, for at least the promise of a quick death.
Regulation states that you have to do the route once before filing for reassignment.
A shift of caring purple flitted across her scales so quickly Srila thought he might have imagined it. Still, it was something. One time. Go through this nightmare one time. He could survive that. Besides, the danger pay was astronomical. Maybe he could finally buy a proper heating rock instead of the kid's rock he took when he moved out of his parents' nest. No, it would be better to settle some of the training debt first. One had to think long-term in this economy. Veins of green broke up his maudlin blue as he gained confidence, walking to the shipping and receiving bay. With effort, he looked past that one all-consuming word and found which ship he'd be piloting. It was a Piety-class cargo hauler, old and well-used like any corporation's fleet. The aged machine had probably seen a dozen cycles beyond its working lifespan before the company bought it and gave it a fresh coat of paint. Every pilot he knew joked about why they were called the Piety class. It's not due to the long-gone tradition of Cleeth priests presiding over the assembly line, chanting hymns for the parts to come within tolerance. It was because you started praying the thing stayed together as soon as you strapped yourself in.
Great,
Srila thought, eyeing the lengthy, bulbous cargo ship waiting in the dock for him.
Not only am I flying into a death trap, I'm flying in a death trap.
He was starting to turn blue again and thought he may just stay that color the entire trip. "Hey!" a voice called out, gruff and craggy, riddled with years of stim stick abuse. Srila looked up to see a plump Cleeth, scales turned rigid and lumpy with age, leaning against his ship. He wore patched, torn, and repatched flight suit. Srila fought to keep his chromatophores from displaying active disgust. The stains on that yellowing outfit had stains.
Yeah?
Srila called back, approaching the entrance hatch. "You're the new kid, huh?" The older Cleeth looked Srila up and down, not even hiding his disapproving colors. "They keep sending me blue bugs," he grumbled, pushing himself off the hull. "Leave that hatch alone. It don't work no more." He motioned to where Srila was about to pull on the lever. "Follow me, blue bug," he said, then started climbing up the side of the prow. Srila saw that handholds had been crudely riveted to the ablative plates. He was pretty sure one of them was a malformed wrench, and another was the handle from a closet door. Still, they held the old lizard's bulk, so his practically emaciated frame shouldn't have an issue. He climbed, finding that the cockpit emergency eject window was propped open with a mop. At this point, he was wondering if he'd survive hitting vacuum, let alone actually making it to the Sol system.
I'm Srila. Who are you?
He asked. You can call me Cap, Bluebug. He pulled the mop away the same millisecond as Srila's tail slithered through the window. I'm here to show you the ropes on your new route, so you don't actively die of shock or whatever. He reapplied the seals to the window, screwing the frame back down and giving it a hearty push to make sure it was in place. Satisfied, he tossed the screwdriver over his shoulder, letting it land in his toolbox with practiced ease. I'm also supposed to give you a list of idiosyncrasies the pittance has developed over time.
The pittance?
Srila asked, though pretty confident that he knew the answer. The older Cleeth, Cap, just motioned around lazily. The pittance, our trusty, noble, and rickety as all gleft steed. He strapped himself into the co-pilot chair and pointed for Srila to take the main seat.
Sorry, I thought the ship was Alpha Gamma 08,
he replied, dusting the cushion free of Beto crisp crumbs before settling in. Gleft me, you are blue, Cap grumbled, flicking switches to start up the departure sequence. You're the pilot, you name the ship. If you don't name her, you won't love her, and if you don't love her, she'll kill you. It's just facts.
Why the pittance then?
He asked, aware of the superstitious tradition a lot of the older pilots prescribed to. Because that's all the higher-ups give me to keep her running, he laughed, settling back while Srila went through his own pre-launch sequences. Barely gave me enough to give her a fresh adjacent coat of paint last repair cycle, let alone getting the reactor up to code, the door fixed, the atmo scrubbers cleaned. The list is long and mighty. I leave it tacked to the engine room wall if you want some light reading while we're en route.
But if the ship gets audited, we'll...
Srila was interrupted with a choking cackle from Cap. Audited? Nah, that'll only happen if you raise a fuss. At Srila's sustained look of confusion, Cap took pity and explained further. Listen, it all comes down to money and how much the powers that be can squeeze out of your scaly behind. Cap gripped the steering column for emphasis, the statement punctuated with the docking clamps letting go. We need ships that run to make deliveries. Barely, right on the bleeding edge of running, is still running. So, folks in fancy offices who get their beetles dipped in Goldari jam and daintily placed on their tongues by breeding season beauties, they do the math. What does it cost to just keep the ships running? Okay. Now, how much to get the ships up to code? Is it more than bribing some auditors into pointing both their eyes in a different direction? Not even close. Until some blue bug kicks up a fuss. Cap managed to turn a sarcastic shade of blue and effected a higher pitch in his voice. Hey, my reactor's leaking alpha particles. Hey, the seals don't keep full atmosphere. Hey, my thrusters yaw by 15 degrees, blah, blah, blah. What do you think happens then?
An audit?
Srila guessed, guiding the pittance out of the dock and into the open spaceways. Yep, Cap confirmed, punching in the access codes for the FTL gate as they queued up. The pilot catches a gleft ton of flack for letting their ship fall into such disrepair before they get fired, fined, sued, and whatever else. By the end of it, the pilot is the financial equivalent to a smoldering crater, while the lizards at the top actually make a profit off of the whole scene.
So, no raising a fuss.
Srila deflated a bit into his seat. He knew the system was rigged, but having it explained that cavalierly was still disheartening.
That's not great, but I can deal with the pittance for one trip,
he said, mostly to himself. One trip? Ha! Cap startled Srila with the sharp and sudden laughter. Nope. You and the pittance are practically married now, kid. I'm retiring. This is my last haul. Once I'm gone, you'll be the only one who knows how to keep the old girl afloat. At that news, Srila's color plunged into the deepest blue until he looked the next best thing to black.
No, that doesn't. The regulations. I can transfer.
I can say the pittance is unflyable. It practically... He stopped himself, realizing what he was saying. I could kick up a fuss, he whimpered, realizing just how trapped he was. Hey, don't worry, Bluebug, Cap said, his gruff cheer undeterred by Shrila's spiraling sorrow. The pittance may not be a luxury-class cruiser, but you landed the glefting jackpot for shipping routes. What? Shrila looked at Cap, incredulous. The deliveries to Earth! The Death World! Where the humans, the galactic equivalent to living napalm, live? Yep. Best damn job in the whole cargo hauling trade, he said as the ship was dragged into the FTL lane, folding them through subspace. Ugh, the shift always leaves a weird taste in my mouth. Cap got out of his seat, content to let the pittance travel on its own until the next gate. Wait, how is this the best route? Shrila asked, chasing after Cap, who started wheeling his tools down the length of the ship. Where do I start? He laughed, pulling out a diagnostic meter and poking relays. First, the money. Kid, they need to pay through the cloaca to get people to go anywhere near those cursed mammals. He chuckled, switching out a power relay that was about to short out. You know that the turnover for this route was 2 runs. One to learn the ship, a second to foist it off on some other blue bug like you. Then I saw what an untapped gold mine it was. Over the last 10 cycles, I saved up enough to retire on my own private satellite around Thralek 4. He handed the diagnostic meter to Shrila. You start poking the relays over there on the life support system. Now's the time to do maintenance, while the ship's stuck in subspace. Which was against what the manual indicated. There was always supposed to be somebody at the helm, and repairs were to be made on your own time. Shrila assumed most regulations were ignored on this ship. Anyway, where was I? Oh, right. Best job ever. The humans are probably the most outstanding part. You won't believe me till you meet them yourself, but delivering to humans has perks. Like a quick death? Shrila asked, finding the life support relays in passable repair. I heard they eat meat right off the bones of their animals. Yeah, they do, Cap confirmed, which surprised Shrila, who expected some kind of denial or mollifying clarification on the rumor. Nearly changed gender on the spot when I saw them do that the first time, he joked. But they don't murder and eat everything, specifically thinking folks like us. No, I mean actual perks. They tip, for one. Sometimes in credits, sometimes in stuff even better than credits. What could possibly be better than credits? Shrila asked, still trying to wrap his mind around voluntarily tipping a delivery pilot. Made a delivery to a human event called a barbecue one season. A wistful look overcame the old Cleeth, clearly reflecting on a fond memory. They gave me this stuff, a narcotic known as cornbread. Technically, it's some kind of cake. Delicious. I'd get my tail wailed on by a gang of Catalan ninjas, then ask for seconds if it meant I got another tray of cornbread. Can't you just buy some while on Earth? Shrila asked, taken aback by the reverence over a foodstuff. Sure can, but it's usually made in a factory or something. He waved the idea away as though it were personally offensive. The homemade stuff just hits different. Anyway, I'm heading down to the reactor. Gotta reapply fresh tape on the shielding once per FTL jump. You keep checking relays. Cap vanished below deck, leaving Shrila to ponder his position. He could, in theory, hand this ship off next run. If he could survive one trip in this heap, he could probably manage 2. If what Cap said was true, he could tough it out until he had enough money to pay off his debts. It's not like the other ships he'd be flying were any safer, just less dangerous locations. The credits wouldn't mean anything if a human tore him in half, though. His mind went in circles like that until a chime rang out from the helm, letting him know the FTL gate was approaching in 10 minutes. He finished up the last couple of relays and started back, listening to the whine of the reactor coming down, preparing to enter real space again. Shrila heard Cap huffing his way up the stairs when the ship lurched suddenly, dropping into real space too soon to have hit a gate. Shrila tumbled to the decking, power flicking on and off from the stress of decompressing without a gate to take the load. There was a very small list of reasons a ship would just pop out of subspace. A massive gravitational field would do it, but FTL lanes were routed with those in mind. If the reactor crashed, the subspace bubble would fail without power, but Shrila heard the reactor functioning just fine. Most likely...
Pirates!
Shrila called down to Cap as he got to his feet and ran to the helm. Cap, swearing and grumbling, followed at a more sedate pace.
Well, of course it's pirates,
he grouched, sounding more perturbed at having taken a tumble than being mercilessly slaughtered for their cargo.
Pittance, open a line to the idiot piles of gleft who pulled this stunt.
Please, vessel!
Claimed the shrill voice of an Atari, the avian filling the view screen.
You are the prey of the graphics raptors! Power down your reactor and prepare!
Where's Captain Thok?
Cap asked, peering at the view screen as though to look around the Atari currently threatening them.
Thok is dead! He was old and timid!
The Otari shrilled, gesturing wildly as their kind tended to do.
That's a crying shame. He was a good guy. Always gave me a solid deal on parts, you know.
Cap said, sounding genuinely sorry, with a tinge of sorrow coloring his scales.
Enough! Prepare to be boarded!
The pirate, apparently at the end of his meager patience, squawked at his crew to begin docking.
You will be slaves, cleat serfs, sold at market alongside your wares! Despair! Cry out in distress!
Yeah, I'll get right on that,
Cap said. Shrila felt like committing to that suggestion. Wailing in despair seemed about his speed at the moment.
Oh, hey, before we get rolling on the whole getting boarded, stuff stolen, slaving and such, can I speak to your second in command?
Cap sounded bored, like this was mostly an inconvenient stop. They may as well have been at an FTL gate repair depot getting a hull breach welded.
Why speak to my second? I am the first! I am the captain!
The Otari's feathers puffed up in self-importance.
Sure, now.
Cap let that hang in the air, and Shrila watched as the pirate internally struggled with taking the bait. It didn't last long.
What do you mean? Do you know of mutiny?
He shrilled in what Shrila assumed was the Otari equivalent to a whisper.
No, nothing like that.
Cap fished around his seat as he spoke, coming up with a bag of Beto crisps.
I just want to be on good footing with the new captain after the humans find out you stole their stuff. That's actually how I met Thok when his captain tried to roll me over.
He crunched on a few Betos while the pirate stared through the view screen in silence.
New carry. Human cargo?
There was no wild gesticulating now, just the jittery tapping of his foretalons against each other.
Uh-huh. Told that to Thok's old captain. Never learned her name,
Cap said, emptying out the dregs from his bag of crisps into his mouth.
I swear, they put less and less into these bags,
he mused, putting the empty packet off to the side.
Anyway, she didn't listen. Barely got 2 light minutes away before a human cruiser clipped her wings. They pulled me out of the cells, put me back in my hauler, and sat Thok in the captain's chair. Told him not to pirate anymore, but it was all Thok knew. Instead, he opted to just steer clear of human stuff and not do that slavery thing. Humans hate slavery for some reason.
Cap shrugged, yawned, and got comfy.
If you still want Whales of Despair or whatever, Bluebug here can cover my tab. Wake me up when a human marine steps on your neck.
To all appearances, Cap did actually start to nod off. Shrila, incredulous, just kept looking between his dozing mentor and the pirate who had threatened to sell him into slavery. As the silence grew, Shrila's color transitioned from the terrified yellow into a mellower green. He didn't even realize it, but Cap's obstinate lack of concern was infectious.
There's no profit in selling an old lizard,
the Otari eventually said, clearly trying to come up with a reason for his crew to digest.
And human cargo carries more risk than worth. Halt docking procedures! We're leaving them alone! Ready the FTL snare for our next victims!
On that note,
Cap said, slurring his way into consciousness,
you want to adjust that snare's gain and output parameters. Too jarring. Thok had a feather-like touch with that thing. Felt like coming out of a gate half the time. Puts less strain on the ships. Less money spent on repairing the spoils.
I shall take that under advisement,
the pirate said before closing the signal off. Srila just stared at the screen, now displaying their forward view. Their vessel ambled back into position to pull the next ship out of the FTL lane.
Perks,
Cap said, spooling up the sublight engines again.
It'll take a couple of hours to get the rest of the way to the gate. I'll ride the helm. You see if those pirate wannabes hurt the pittance.
Srila numbly shambled off and did as ordered. He ran diagnostics, finding a few more stressed relays, some buckling hull plates, and one of the oxygen scrubbers popped loose. Overall, it could have been a lot worse. The chore had taken the entire trip to the gate, as well as most of the FTL trip itself. He was reapplying the reactor shielding tape when Cap called him back up.
Take a seat, Bluebug. You're in for a treat,
Cap said, and Srila strapped in, ready for the re-entry into normal space. It was a lot smoother than he was expecting. The human end of the gate was clearly well maintained. He still turned such a virulent yellow he could be used as a traffic reflector. The human gate emptied out into a fairly standard sublight sorting queue. It was in geosynchronous orbit with their primary moon, affording a staggering view of the blue and green planet below. It also had a view down the barrel of a gun so large he could park the pittance inside of it, plus a few other cargo haulers and his apartment. The whole building, of course, not his closet of a living space. It was built into the moon, boring into the surface, turning the entire celestial structure into a weapon.
Gleft, Bluebug. You look like you've never seen a planet cracker before,
Cap chuckled.
They keep that one pointed at the gate in case some invading armada decides to drop a destroyer on their front door. Sensible policy, if you ask me.
That one?
The implication being that humanity had more planet-destroying superweapons.
I mean, they can point the one they have on Mars at the gate too,
he shrugged, getting into the appropriate laneway.
That's only if the orbits are aligned right. I had to deliver a shell to that one a cycle back. Took the entire cargo hold, and I still had to leave the bay doors open to space to fit it in.
At Srila's incredulous look, glancing out at the yawning gun barrel, then back to the cargo bay, Cap explained further.
The Mars one is a bit smaller than this guy, of course.
Oh, of course,
Srila whimpered.
Now the one on Titan, that thing is impressive.
Cap made a motion with his hands as though displaying a prize-winning glorfworm.
Makes the moon gun look like a pea shooter. I was delivering the restock for the facility cafeteria on that run, I think.
While Cap hummed to himself, guiding the pittance to the orbital customs gate, Srila wondered if he could handle another nonsensical revelation about these ridiculous mammals. He reasoned that, if not, it wouldn't be his problem anymore. Sure, Cap would have to figure out what to do with the body, but Srila would be surprised if none of his would-be replacements had expired from shock. He'd know what to do. While Srila debated proactively spacing himself, the hailing line chimed. This is Terra Prime Customs, calling cargo hauler designation Alpha Gamma 08. Came a low, bored voice. Please state your purpose and destination.
Hey, Carl,
Cap responded, flicking on the view screen to reveal a dark-skinned human who looked like the mammalian version of Cap.
We're delivering a bunch of base supplies to Oahu base. Food and pop-up hab units, mostly. Some medical stuff. Uniforms, that kind of gleft.
Right, send the manifest over and we'll scan for illegal crap, the human Carl said while hitting some buttons. Most of his attention stayed on a book he was reading. Hey, you get the latest novel in the Miss Rimke series?
I might,
Cap hedged. Come on, Cap. Carl whined. "The publisher's out in the Crab Nebula or something, and we're not due to get it our way for a month. Do me a solid. I can't wait that long to know what happens to my thick dragon queen."
"You know what I want,"
Cap said matter-of-factly. "Listen, it's hard to smuggle cornbread onto the space elevator, okay?" he pleaded, tone hushed. At Cap's unimpressed stare and unmoving gaze, Carl relented. "Fine, chameleon-looking corn addict. I'll bring it up next shift. Evil damned lizard."
Next shift?
Srila said, finally speaking up, though still bright yellow despite the relaxed air of conversation.
How long is that? We're supposed to deliver this as quickly as possible. Regulations say that—
"Listen, Bananarama," Carl said, stopping Srila in his tracks. "Regulations take a back seat when a hurricane is currently tearing Hawaii a new aft port."
What's a hurricane?
Srila asked.
Or a Hawaii?
"A big storm,"
Cap clarified, looking awfully pleased.
"Hawaii's the sub-territory we're heading to. Okay, we'll park in low orbit, wait out the storm, do the delivery, and be back in time for cornbread."
The old lizard laughed, avarice in his eyes. They did just that, moving to a clear section of space where they'd wait for a day or so, watching the swirling cloud move beneath them. Cap, stating seniority, claimed the only true bunk in the pittance. He fell asleep almost as soon as he laid flat on the heated rock, a gravelly snore sounding through the ship. Srila looked down at the clouds. The regulations told him that deliveries were supposed to happen as quickly as possible. They also stated that unauthorized delays, which this most certainly counted as, would be docked from his pay. Standing there, he watched the only reason this trip was worth anything, his danger pay, disappear into the swirling mass of fluffy white clouds.
If humans aren't as threatening as I thought,
Srila said to himself, remembering the evidence from the trip. An idea began forming, thinking on the perks Cap kept mentioning, and how Carl looked about as dangerous as a harshly worded letter.
If human reputation is overblown, their death world is probably the same. We're only up here because Cap thinks some stupid bread is worth more than my payday.
That thought carried him to the helm. He sat down, plotted his course, and fired the engines. The pittance plunged into the atmosphere, its ablative shielding doing its job, bleeding heat away in a fantastic display of color and fire. Srila found his resolve starting to waver when the air started getting thicker. The swirling mass of clouds got close enough to appear like the surface of some great and terrible ocean of churning fury. Then they were below the surface. The ship groaned like a hurt beast, crying out in a deafening agony. Overheating hull plates gave the air an acrid tang as the thrusters burned for all they were worth just to try stop from being swept away. Srila began struggling with the controls, then fighting them, then putting all of his weight against the steering column. He didn't realize he was shouting out in the effort until Cap started pushing on the column as well, his own gravelly shout added to the din. It was less than a minute before they were below the clouds, but Srila felt as though every muscle in his body had fought for hours. He couldn't see the island, but the sensors, static-filled and flickering as they were, told him they were close. Then lightning crashed through the ship. The entire vessel blacked out, and the impact of slamming into the tree line vibrated through the entire structure. Bulkheads closed around the helm as the pittance suffered catastrophic hull failure. Srila thought nonsensically that he hoped the cargo was okay. He was about to die on this cursed route, and he was still worried about the cargo? It would have been funny, except he and Cap crashed to a sudden stop. Even that was a relief, no matter that Srila had smashed his head against the front panel, or that an alarming amount of water was pouring into the cabin. He was happy not to be falling anymore, even if that meant drowning.
Cold,
was all Srila could mutter as his body was held close by the freezing water. Then a second great crash, like the thunder in the sky, but he felt it through the bulkhead of the ship. A grinding scream of bent metal filled every sense. Then something too strong and too hot grabbed him about his torso. He remembered stories of the boiled Cleeth, from when he was a hatchling, a Cleeth who set his sleeping rock too high and cooked himself. He hid under the rocks of wasteful children, waiting to claim them with his crispy, over-hot hands to cool himself down.
I didn't believe,
Shrila mumbled before everything went black. He woke up with a start, surprised at all the pain he felt. Mainly, he hadn't expected to wake up, and he shouldn't be in pain if he was dead. Instead, he was lying on a very warm, very comfortable metal plate, inside a tent of some kind. He checked to find a bandage around his head and a freshly removed IV drip beside him.
"Hey, Blue Bug,"
Cap said, ambling in through the front of the tent, letting in unfettered sunlight as he did. He was bandaged as well and hobbling a bit, but otherwise looking very alive, happy even.
"You are the craziest, luckiest, dumbest idiot genius I have ever met."
What?
Shrila couldn't think of anything else to say, still disoriented from everything that he remembered.
"Hold that thought and come with me."
Cap helped Shrila off the cot. He realized the gravity here was a lot to deal with, which revealed why Cap was hobbling so much.
"Yeah, that takes a minute to get used to."
They supported each other until they were outside, where Shrila could appreciate what had actually occurred. The Pitten's helm had detached from the aft of the ship. The helm crashed into a river, where Cap explained a human had ripped through the bulkheads to save his dumb tail. The rest had scorched a trench on a relatively open stretch of land. Humans were moving all around and over the thing, some taking the cargo out, some clearly performing repairs.
"You lucked out because you essentially landed a whole cargo ship of storm relief supplies in a city that desperately needed them."
Cap pointed out the pop-up habitation units that had been meant for the base, one of which was a hastily put-together hospital that they had walked out of. Otherwise, food was being handed out, medical supplies used on the injured, water being purified.
But the company will take the whole thing out of my pay.
Shrila started hyperventilating at the prospect.
"Nah,"
Cap said, waving the warrior away.
"I already spoke with the base we were running this stuff to. They agreed to consider the supplies delivered, since we essentially gave it to the people they'd end up using it for anyway. You dodged a planet-cracking bullet there, Blue Bug."
What about the pittance?
He asked, the humans still busily working away at it.
"Well, the locals don't exactly want to keep it,"
Cap laughed.
"So, as a way of saying thanks, they're fixing it up for you. Better than new. Fresh reactor and everything."
But that would cost a fortune. There's no way that delivery's worth the hull repairs, let alone a new reactor.
Shrila said, still running the numbers and finding his debts unpayable at the end.
"They got an anonymous donation to help cover the material costs."
Cap shrugged, giving Shrila a bump with his elbow.
"Thralak 4 is overrated anyway. Figure if I retire where they make cornbread, I'm coming out ahead."
How will you pay for anything?
Shrila was aghast that Cap had squandered his retirement fund on getting the pittance fixed up. It wasn't like the old lizard could get a job on the Death World that would allow him any reasonable lifestyle.
"Oh, that's easy,"
he laughed.
"They kinda bucked the whole capitalism thing. They don't really pay for nothing down here. Keep track of debts, all that. If you ain't got food, a place to live, doctors, or whatever, you ask for it. The Terran Coalition pretty much gives you what you need to be happy. Humans like to work, so they do. Only reason Carl sits up there drooling over Miss Rimke is 'cause he likes the view and talking to cultured fellas like me." The prospect of living on a debt-free planet had Shrila debating going back at all. "There are caveats. Need to be a citizen, but that's just some paperwork and references. I got references out my tail, though. Sure, the gravity is a bit sharp, and the air has a hell of a lot of oxygen in it, but I foresee an unconscionable amount of barbecue in my future. Can't argue with that. Hey, let me introduce you to the guy who pulled you out of the river." The pittance took another 2 days to get up to code,
and was basically brand new. It didn't even groan or shimmy as he flew through the atmosphere. As a favor to Cap, Srila ensured that Carl got his novel, and may well have co-opted the cornbread for himself. He had to admit it was distressingly good. Otherwise, the trip back was uneventful. He made his logs on the way, not having to spend hours of time doing minor maintenance. The delivery was completed during inclement weather, causing damage to the ship. The ship was repaired to a space worthiness level. Srila was growing wise enough not to mention how well it had been repaired. He didn't want Althar Shipping Co. to take the pittance and hand him some other taped-together mess. Noted it was an unorthodox delivery, but accepted without issue. Ultimately, he handed the papers in to the duty assignment officer, who docked his pay for the long wait time as he expected. It didn't matter though. This was his new route now, and he was going to make it back in time. And maybe get some more cornbread.